Hello everybody, this is FrSky Steve, and today we're going to do an overview of the entire Ethos operating system. So this is going to be something that is going to just give you a frame of reference as to what this thing does and where to find everything. And I've gone to this presentation quite a few times. In fact, I had someone call me one time and he said he was so lost and frustrated with the radio, he was going to return it. And I gave him about 15 minutes over the phone, and I explained everything. And about a year later, he came up to me at an event and said, "I am so thankful you spent the time with me because I would have returned the radio and I would have missed out on a really great transmitter. I am so happy with it. Thank you so much." Very sincere guy, and I do appreciate that. So I do work for FrSky. I work out of the North American branch office, which is located in Brea, California. But I do work for the owner. So what I do is I travel around and I talk to people about the FrSky transmitters and receivers and all these other things that the transmitters can do, including things like servos and our telemetry items that are used through modules. But what I want to focus on today is just an overview of the FrSky operating system, and it's known as Ethos. So what is this all about? And especially if you're someone who's transitioning to us from another radio brand, it's like moving into a different city. So you have a hardware store, you have restaurants, you have post offices, and you have all the basics in your new city. You just don't know where it's at. Same thing. Everything that you're used to in your other transmitter is in here, except it's in different locations. And I would say that's part of the struggle, part of the learning curve, is that learning where it goes, where everything's located, and how to operate with it. But once you get this figured out, you are into something that is just a really nice operating system. This operating system was written from the ground up for a specific microcontroller that's inside of the FrSky tandem and twin base transmitters. It's known as the STM H7 microcontroller. It's a very ahead of its time microcontroller. We're the first manufacturer for RC transmitters to write an operating system exclusively from the ground up for that microcontroller. This microcontroller is going to be out probably for the next 20 years. So if you learn Ethos now, it's not going to change too drastically in the future. It will get improved. We do improvements all the time, but once you start working with it and once you start learning it, you're going to be in a much better place. It's like a smartphone. Everything is touch based. You put your fingers on things and different things light up. You can go to different locations. We also have buttons here that do kind of the same thing. And what this all is at first is a little bit much, but after a while you start to get used to it, and then once you get your head wrapped around it, you really start to thrive. So let's talk about some of the things you'll find. First of all, you can see I have a model here. The model is a B17, and what I have on the top here is all sorts of interesting icons. So I have things like this is set up as a slave radio for if I'm doing buddy boxing, because that's what the symbol means. These are telling me how strong the link quality are or is, and then we also have how much volume is coming out of the speaker and how strong the battery is. We have our time clock, all sorts of interesting things that you can look at, and right away you have plenty of information. Of course, you have timers. You can have multiple timers set up, and you have you can put pictures of your plane on there. You can actually take photos of your plane with your cell phone and upload them into Ethos Suite and put them in here. And you can have sounds associated with switches. You can have timer callouts. You can have telemetry callouts. There's just so much that this does. So the main thing I wanted to talk to you about is that there's two things I want to point out here. One is this right here. It's models. It's the same as if I hit this button right here, we go to models. And the other one is called system. And so the idea is that when you get into this, they do different things. system is changes that are permanent into the radio system, so it affects all models, whereas model is specific only to this model and it does not affect anything on other models unless you set up something like a global condition. So let's go in and let's start looking at some real basics here. How do you set up a new plane? And what you do is you press the airplane icon or the model, and the top left right there's all these airplanes I have set up, and I go in here and I go to this plus button right here, and from there I go to create a model, and I have all these choices. I can create a bunch of different things: airplanes, gliders, helicopters, multi-rotors. We're going to do an airplane, and the first question is, are you using a stabilized receiver? And the first answer is no. That's what we're going to work with. We're not going to set one of those up. So we're going to set up a basic plane. I can set up 4 motors if I feel like it, but I'm just going to stick with 1. This is a very basic setup: 2 channels for ailerons and 2 channels for flaps, right? And then on your tail, you would have 1 channel for elevator, 1 channel for rudder. You've seen this before. You probably set these things up before. And what we're going to do is we're going to give it a name, and I'm going to call it MAULE, and I'm going to find an image of them all. You might have to download your own images or take photos of your mall if you're setting one of these up. Anyways, right there. And we have a plane that's already started to be set up. If we go into the mixes, so hit the airplane icon, go into mixes, this is where you plug everything in. So your ailerons go into channels 1 and 5. If you come to some spectrum, it was throttle, aileron, elevator, rudder. And we are AETR, aileron, elevator, throttle, rudder. And then flaps are not there. As you can see just by looking at this, we don't have a source. So if you click on it once, go and edit, we can go in and give it an input, and I just highlight it. When I get to the screen, I flip a switch, switch A, and it knows that when I move switch A around, the flaps will move. It's pretty straightforward as far as that's concerned. Now, the thing that I will show you is that what I'm going to show you next is pretty much true of all the other channels. Everything about the aileron channel is located right here. So as long as you click on it, you can tell that you have channels 1 and 5 for aileron. And I can click on it and go into edit, or I can also long press on it and it goes into edit as well. And where do you find dual rates in Expo? Expo is a curve, so you find it there, and dual rates are your weights and rates, and you can keep adding things here, so you can set up your dual rates with different switches. So we can move it around, for example, switch B. So that's where you'd set those up. So that's just a real basic how we would set that up. You can set up differential, which means on the aileron that one aileron that goes down is going to go down by a certain degree less than the other one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it up so that when something goes up, let's say 1 inch, your left aileron goes up 1 inch, the right aileron will come down 3/4 of an inch. So it's 25% less than 1 full inch, and that helps with adverse yaw. And that's what's kind of fun about this. You can set it up so that you very easily can start fine-tuning your plane. And inside of here as well, we have things like channel count. So this is, if I wanted to, I can add another 2 channels right here, and then I go down to here and move down here. This is where I would select where I put the extra channels, but we don't want to do that. I'm going to move it back to 2, and there you go. It looks pretty good. So this is everything you need to know about as far as setting up this particular, your ailerons. Everything you work on is right in there, and it's true of your elevator and for your rudder as well, right? But then there's also this little button right here, and this plus sign. You click on that, and you get all kinds of different things. And so one of them is the idea that all these mixes, and I worked with quite a few of them. One of my favorites is aileron rudder mix. That also helps with adverse yaw. But people will say, I don't see a landing gear mix. So what you do is you click on this, put it in the last position, and you come in here. If you hit this, you'll start to erase everything, and you just create one that's called GEAR, and the source is going to be switch C. Let's see. Switch. Usually just put, of course, switches. Well, do it the old-fashioned way. Usually it works. My simulator just does not want to work right now. And you go down here, and it's on one channel, and you find yourself a free channel to put it. And so channel 8, for example, put it there. Just say yes. And now you have a landing gear switch that works on channel C. You would set it up as, you can go in and fine-tune that. There's actually videos that explain how to set up landing gear, but the idea is that you can come in here and easily keep adding on to this and create some pretty interesting and extensive models, and that's the beauty of everything. We're going to get out of the mixes, and we're going to go into the RF system right now, because what this does is this. I went in here, I changed the owner ID registration to FrSky-1, right? Because it's usually a bunch of random letters and numbers. And what this is this is your passphrase. This is like branding your transmitter to your receiver. This is a phrase, and it's very specific. When we're looking for information coming at us from the receiver's looking for something, it's looking primarily for things that have the passphrase like of this right here. So because of that, what it does, it's able to not listen to noise in the environment, and we can get better range, and it's more reliable signal because it's sniffing for this, this and this only. It's not looking for someone else's passphrase. All right, so what we do is this is the internal module. People often get the transmitter and ask me where the antennas go, and the antennas are actually built into the transmitter. The 900 megahertz, if you have a tandem transmitter, is in the handle, and the 2.4 gigahertz isn't behind the screen. Turn the state to on. We're going to switch this. I'm going to switch it over to the tandem receiver, and this is why I made such a big deal about the passphrase. It's because when you select this, what you're supposed to do is plug in your receiver and have your finger on what used to be known as the bind button, but now it is the register button. Push it in, and then when you do that, what will happen is that you'll see this screen pop up, and then it will say that, oh, here's your registration ID. There's your passphrase, and the receiver name. It would say something like a TDR10 or TDSR18 or something else like that, TDR6. It's not going to say Archer, but anyway, you hit register, and from this point on, that receiver is associated with this transmitter, and that's a great thing, because when you want to bind it, all you do is you hit this, and you simply plug in the plane or the receiver, and it will pop up, and you'll find a receiver, and that's it, you're bound. And then the other thing you would do is you would step over to this next screen right over here, turn telemetry on, and this one is showing all kinds of really cool telemetry. Telemetry is the information that comes back from the receiver to the transmitter. So we have everything from like GPS altitude and GPS speed. This is the ground speed, and you can see, like, for example, it's set up in knots. What if you wanted it in miles per hour? You would go in here and change it to miles per hour. So a lot of versatility as far as our plane is going nearly 24 miles an hour. Really should pay attention to it, right? And then the other thing, like, for example, right here, if you look at the vertical speed, that's how much your plane is gaining or losing altitude. it's in meters per second. If you're like me and you're on the imperial system, you would just switch that over feet per second or feet per minute. And that might be a good one, so you have an idea of how you're doing 204 feet a minute. All sorts of great things. A LiPo, this is your pack voltage. So you need sensors in order to read all these things, like GPS modules and other telemetry sensors, airspeed, voltage, current. There's things that are like battery checkers where you can keep track of pack voltage as you're flying. All sorts of great things, right? So that's what telemetry is all about. I'm just going to go back to the screen before. This is where you set things like your timers. So this is where you would change them, and you would go in there, you can edit them, and usually give it a name and change it to down and set it for about 5 minutes. And then you would set up something that was start condition. A lot of times it's something like a system event, and then a throttle active. So with that, we can actually, as the throttle moves, you'll see the timer start to go. And you can also have a reset and proportional timing. There's a lot of different things. We have videos on all of this, so don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole as far as this is concerned. Trims, we have video on trims. You can have your trims do something fine, like they barely move your trims every time you push the trim button, to course where it moves things quite extensively. Once you get your trim set up nicely, what will happen is you can eventually, after a few flights, you can say, this feels right. I move my trims to the sub trim. And what that means is that it's a permanent change, and your trims get reset to 0 and your sub trims are changed. And I'll show you where sub trims are at in a minute. But the one thing that people tend to love about this transmitter is right down here. This thing called instant trim. This is one of the coolest features. So what I would do is I would put on the back of the transmitter, I would use switch J. I keep wanting to push these buttons. E, F, G, H, I, J. Right, so J down, right? And if you highlight this and push the button, it will populate the field, but I don't have that luxury with the simulator. And what this does is, it's time for you to go take your plane up and do your maiden flight, and you're nervous. So you get up to an altitude and you're holding your sticks kind of funny because it's not quite perfectly trimmed. But then what you do is you get it flying level, and you have the throttle up about 40%, and then you push this button, and instantly it trims the whole plane. So it's an instant trim, and it's really cool. So it does aileron, elevator, rudder all at once. Really fantastic, very strong tool. Once you do it for the first time, I recommend you just take it off, because you don't want to accidentally push that while you're out flying. You just want to use it for your main flight only. Okay, now I did mention trims and sub trims. There's this output section right here, and so when you move your sticks around, you'd see these things all light up. If your aileron is reversed, you would come in here and reverse it from there. This is where you would set your endpoints from your high and low endpoints, and this is where you set your setter sub trim. And once we move that trim to sub trim, that this number will change and the trims go back to 0. So all in all, interesting things. Now we go to the next phase here. There's all sorts of interesting things. We have videos on all this. Logic switches. We're coming out with more and more videos. A logic switch is like a regular switch, something you flip up and down, except that something, instead of it being, well, the best example I have is you work with logic switches. You have these cars now where you're driving and it gets dark out, and the car senses that it's getting dark out and turns the lights on for you automatically. But the next morning when it's daylight, you turn your car on, it sees that it's light out, and it keeps your lights off, right? So that's a logic switch. It just kind of looks at something and makes the decision. And so that's what logical conditions do. It could be a combination of switch positions. It could be your stick position. It could be something based on telemetry. There's a lot of things it can do. Special functions is something that we do. This is one of the most popular ones, is the display audio. You come in here and you can set up through a switch. So you would have active condition. It might be, I wonder if this is going to work this time. Oh, no, it doesn't work. All right, so what I would do is I would do a switch position, and maybe at switch B. When switch B is up, that's going to be the thing that activates this voice. And you come in here and you would select a file, play file, and it might be flaps up. So whenever the switch B is on, it will say flaps up. Pretty cool stuff, right? So there's VARs. VARs are really cool. We're starting to play with them more and more in our setups. They basically do is help you assign a number to certain things. We'll play with those. A little bit too much to talk about right now, but it's a very strong feature. If you've worked with global variables in the past with other transmitters, you'll love the VARs. The trainer system we have is one of the strongest ones. It's called Para. We come in here, we change it to master or slave, and you can use a cable, but there's built-in high-speed Bluetooth that you can work with 2 FrSky transmitters. And it's very easy to set these things up. All you have to do on the slave radio is set up a basic model. And then on the master radio, you give it conditions so that when you flip a switch, for example, the student has control of it. Whatever you have set up on the master radio, the student will have. So if you have turned on high rates and you turned on something like stabilization, the student will have that as well. So, and you can also do things from the master, like bring landing gear down. You can also turn stabilization on and off. You can change rates. So really cool system all the way around. And we're going to get in now to system. This is the permanent things, and the things that I would point out here is, in general, this is where you can come in here and you can do things like change what this looks like from the top. You can turn these off, and you can see that. See how it has numeric number right now? Now it shows a percentage just graphically what the battery looks like. Come in here, you can assign a master volume, long press on it, go to use a source, and you can use something like a slider. Not channels, but we go into analogs, and we can go to your right slider if you wanted to. Just go all the way up. Let's say usually pot 1, or I use pot 3 a lot on the X20 style transmitter. So there's that center vertical slider. You can use that to turn your volume up and down. And then we go into, this is where you set your dates and times, and this is where you can go in and check your hardware. You can calibrate your hardware. You can even work with your gyro. There's a gyro built in, and you can calibrate that as well. The gyro can be used. It's a little bit cute. You can actually tilt your radio and have different call outs. I haven't seen a lot of people play with it, but it's there. You can come in here and assign your switches. They're usually assigned by names, but like for example, you can come in here and you can change this to flaps. So this 3-position switch is your flap switch, for example, and you'll know that just by looking at it that's what this controls. So there's a lot of customability as far as this transmitter is concerned. The last thing I'll show you is this is where you would set up a lot of different things as far as all the extras that you would attach to your FrSky system. So you, for example, this is how you get telemetry out of the servos. We have this exact servo line, and when they're hooked up, you'll see that this lights up, and what you can do is you can assign channels to it. So it could be channel 1, which is a left aileron, for example. And the idea behind this is that when you use FBus, you can do things like you can change the range of the servo. So instead of being 90 degrees, it can be 90, 120, 180 degrees. And you can also change the direction of the servo and things like that. Once again, it's with exact servos. They'll also give you a temperature reading. They will also give you a voltage reading and a current reading, so you can keep track of all this as you fly your plane. Receivers, this is where we put a Lua script in and set the stabilized receiver right in there. All sorts of really cool, interesting things. And so the whole system is really quite, well, I think it's wonderful. I mean, it really is. I'll put it this way. I started flying RC planes a number of years ago, and then after a while I got kind of bored with it, and I went into flying the planes that were with flight controllers, so it was FPV planes. I had a lot of fun with that. I never thought I'd go back to flying light ascent planes, but with this Ethos operating system, I'm able to do so much more with the plane. It's really kind of fun to really start testing out, watching videos, listening to others, seeing how they have things set up. Jose, for example, at FrSky has a ton of really interesting videos where he just kind of like, wow, I want to try that out. And all of a sudden, I found myself really wanting to get to the flying field to try out all these things. And I want to try out this logical condition, and I want to see if it works, if I do this or that, the other thing. For example, you can set up a GPS, and then we get to a certain altitude, like 400 feet. If you get over 400 feet, maybe the transmitter starts vibrating. That's the kind of stuff you can do with the FrSky transmitter. Really an excellent all-around system. I do thank you for watching. If you have questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments.